L&D isn't dying, but the traditional models are. AI is reshaping not just what we learn, but how, when, and with whom as well. So the big question is, are we really ready for this new era of learning? I'm your host, Shveta Malhan, and this is TIDES, where we explore transformational innovations driving enterprise strategies. Today, I'm joined by Chris Stefanyk, Head of Revenue and Operations at Disco, the AI-first learning platform helping bold organizations build modern academies and community-powered learning experiences. If you're still relying on static LMSs or one-size-fits-all courses, this episode will challenge everything that you think about corporate learning. So let's get into the conversation. Chris, welcome to TIDES.
Thanks for having me, Shveta.
Chris, the systems that have brought us here won't get us to the future state, especially because our future state is evolving by the day and it's still not very well defined. And there are multiple futures that can play out. So in this kind of an evolving transitional state that we are going through, what cracks are showing in the traditional L&D models that you're observing from your vantage point?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that we're seeing, right? I think for us, the reason we started Disco was we felt that there was a lot of kind of existing technology out there that was really driving more like static kind of learning experiences. And certainly I know a lot of our conversation today will likely be around kind of AI and AI fluency and that sort of thing. And in a world in which upskilling around new skills like AI or reinforcing more like durable and power skills like curiosity and other things like that just require much more of like a dynamic environment. So, certainly the static nature of traditional kind of L&D or LMSs is certainly a crack that I've seen, right? And we can dovetail into one of the frameworks that we've developed at Disco that kind of challenges that a little bit, which is like the 6P framework, which I'm happy to walk through in a second. But also the cracks that I'm kind of seeing out there is that this kind of idea that like by having an existing set of course catalogs or an existing learning platform, like you have a learning oriented culture, which like really isn't the case, right? There's so much more that kind of goes into having a true learning oriented kind of organization or culture beyond just having, content and a technology platform. Like it's truly a cultural shift. So happy to explore that kind of further in the conversation as well.
You make a really good point around the static nature of how traditional L&Ds have been operating in the past. And I would say that for the longest time, our hands were also tied because of the technology restrictions that we had. I remember when I was leading learning and development capabilities, the only choice we had was to go with a learning management system, and it
Right.
would be as the infrastructure layer. Then thought leaders like Burson came into the limelight, and they started talking about, oh, learning doesn't just happen in the classroom. He brought in this framework of 4 E's. Learning happens through education. Yes, there is time and place for that, but we also need the right environment for learning happen. We have to create experiences where people can apply that learning so that there's transfer of learning, and then exposure to various contextual scenarios where we make mistakes and we learn through our experiences as well. So do you think LMS was the only reason for orgs to struggle to create learning that sticks and make it relevant for people? I know marketing talks about reaching the right person at the right time with the right message.
Mhm.
We do it, and is that where we need to go?
Yeah, I mean, I really do think so, right? I think in today's landscape, I mean, the need for kind of ongoing, personalized, perpetual learning is like super, super important. And what I've seen by talking to prospects and customers and such, like I think there's, they have certainly like real data that suggests like, the static kind of model completion rates are low, but more importantly, it's like not delivering the outcomes that they want, right? And the actual like content or the skills that they're trying to develop like aren't necessarily like being developed, or the content isn't really being retained, right? So I think like that's kind of what I'm hearing in the market, right? And so that's really what pushed us to kind of think through this kind of six P kind of framework that like I think drives us from like a philosophical perspective, but then also like a technology perspective at Disco. And so happy to kind of quickly share what I mean by that, right? And so the 6Ps on our end is like peers, right? So we're building an AI first social learning platform. Like me on an individual level, Chris Stefanyk, like peer-to-peer learning is how I largely learn, right? I want to learn through my peers at Disco. I want to learn through other go-to-market leaders in the marketplace around how they're using AI, what new experimentations they're driving. Like I fundamentally believe in peer-to-peer learning as a form of adult and corporate learning. So peer-to-peer is important. Personalization is super important, and that's now a realistic possibility with the advent of AI and the tooling that's in the marketplace, not just Disco, but everything, obviously GPT, Perplexity, etc. Uh, Prompts, we think that's actually a skill in of itself to be asking the right questions. As we think about like AI, upskilling and AI fluency in general, the project-based learning is important, right? I would go as far to say like theory is should be a very small percentage of it, and like real world examples should be the majority. And this is how you get real traction and kind of internally. And then the last two are practice and perpetual, right? So ideally, you're building those two kind of go hand in hand, but the learning doesn't just happen in a finite X period of weeks, right? You need to continue to kind of hone your skills. And I even think about something I read today, which was a podcast and newsletter that I follow, Lenny's newsletter. There was a whole thing today, very timely, by the way, around the whole newsletter was around enabling AI kind of fluency in your organization. And there was a sharing of like a 30-day like prompt engineering kind of challenge that like a particular organization rolled out. And so that's what we mean by like perpetual is like spending 5 days, 5 minutes a day or something like that to like enable people to be more comfortable with AI tools. Like that's how you really drive skill development and adoption and those sorts of things. So I'll pause there, but that really encapsulates, I think, like a lot like of our thinking, my thinking around where the model needs to go.
I love that thinking because in my days of in L&D world, we used to look at the 70-20-10 framework, which is also on similar lines like the 5 Ps, where it's like 10% of learning is happening in the classroom, but 90% is happening either through peer-to-peer learning or in the context of work. Yet, my biggest challenge back in the day was majority of the resources the organization spends in creating learning experiences went to that 10% learning where you pull people from their work context into a box like learning management system or in a classroom environment, and then we have to struggle with, oh, there's a lot of scrap learning, there's no transfer of learning happening. So the 5P model that you layered helps bridge that gap by between where what learning we want to deliver to our people, but also deliver them in a fashion and at the time when there's the most need for learning. I mean, an example that I used to use was if I need to learn how to create a pivot table, please do not give me a course on Excel 101. I do not need that. I just need to know how to create a pivot table, right? So that brings us to, I also want to unpack, we talked about the constraints and the restrictions on the L&D function side. Our technology was restricted. How we thought about learning experiences was also influenced by the technology and infrastructure we had. So 5P helps us kind of look at it from a more holistic perspective. In that mix, how from your lens is the modern learner expectations different? Are learners also looking for learning differently, or will there be an imagination gap that we will have to close for the learners because they're so used to thinking about learning in a specific way?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I'd say uh, yeah, definitely curious what you folks are seeing in market too. But I'd say there's two pieces of it, right? I think there is the element of like just in time learning that can be like very tailored, right? So I think more than ever, like the individual employee or corporate learner, it's kind of what you just said, but it's like truly can be made a reality right now, which is like being given, the right information to the question when you need it with, and this is an important point, like the right accredited sources behind it.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's the big thing. Like anybody can go out there right now, and most people have a personal GPT license if their company doesn't allow them to use it, but they might have their own kind of co-pilot or AI tooling in their enterprise, to have a singular place where the employee can go that has very much like an L&D brain that's been trained up on the context and information and learning resources that like the organization deems like appropriate and relevant and contextual, right? That dream is like a reality now, right? Like I think a lot of people are still just going to GPT to get their answers, and that's still sufficient, right? But I think we're moving to a world in which like these kind of bespoke type of environments are there for the employee where they can kind of get what they need when they need it. So that's great. That's your pivot table example, right? Or I need to understand how to use this new tool, right? Then there's probably a broader kind of use case here where it's like I'm either going through my own AI upskilling kind of journey. I work in sales. I know that I'm using, HubSpot for some things and maybe using Clay for other things and whatever other tools are in my stack. The idea that there's like a very personalized learning journey that understands the tools that my organization uses and can deliver me like a very kind of personalized path that now is becoming like very much in the realm of possibilities, right? Like on our end at Disco, we definitely have clients in which they're delivering like very role based pathways already, but they were able to create that kind of very efficiently through AI, i.e., like AI based curriculum generators, which Disco has one of those types of things. So yeah, the delivery of just in time learning and the ability for like true personalized learning by role and then eventually by individual, I think is what people expect because they
Yeah.
know AI can solve these problems.
Absolutely. And I really like the perspective that you're bringing to this conversation from a learner behavior point of view that how I will do my job, I will be more empowered as an employee given the AI tools in my ecosystem to pick and choose which AI tool I'm going to use, where, when, and how. Yes, there will be an enterprise, like maybe an organization invests in an enterprise version of Copilot, but where and when to pick AI pieces from Copilot suite will still be in my control as a user because every user might be on a different maturity of using AI in an organization as well. So the learners are becoming more empowered to pick and choose where, when, and how they want to consume their learning, given the evolving nature of the work that they have to do using the tools that are at their disposal as well.
Yeah. Well, and what's interesting too is like I think what we just kind of spoke through there is like we're pretty close, right? Like this is like you can do it today. But going a little bit further on that true one-to-one personalization,
Yeah.
it can be done today, but a little bit more work, I think, and then we can do it at scale in terms of like what some of the various like learning platforms are working on at the moment, where like we're maybe more like 12, 18 months out is like this idea of an agent that like understands your workflows, what you're doing, and then proactively tells you this is where you have a gap or this is where you have a training opportunity that is like finite, right? It's like seeing that, maybe you're not effectively or efficiently using a tool as well as it should be, or there's opportunity for you to improve your messaging around closing in your communications or your emails, but like it's a proactive agent that's telling you where where you have skill gaps or where there's learning opportunities for you. I mean, I don't think we're that far away from that either. I know that it may feel a little bit big brotherish, right? Like how do you control that? But I
Yeah.
think that's something I've been thinking a lot about as well.
That would definitely be a game changer because then, I mean, it speaks to not just the disruption in the learning space in the work context, but even broadly within the education space. Personalization is what we have been wanting in, like our academic institutions, but we could never get there without the use of technology. So that's fantastic. But before we dive into AI first platform and what it looks like, you talked about AI fluency a little while ago. Can you tell us more about your take on AI fluency and how 5Ps wrap around that?
Yeah, so we've done a lot of work, around AI fluency and a variety of different kind of frameworks on this front. But I mean, we are going through obviously one of the largest kind of shifts, of our lifetime from a how we work perspective, and just obviously AI is disrupting, every industry, right? And so you're seeing leading organizations become pretty vocal around the need to be AI fluent or AI native, right? Like, there's the infamous memo from Toby at Shopify. Zapier has been really public around their progression towards this. And so what we really mean about AI fluency is that your organization is truly building a muscle and not like tool adoption. Like people aren't using tools for tools sake, but they're actually thinking about one, the guiding principles and guidelines in which like this is how we are ethically and responsibly going to use AI in our organization. Then it moves up to be, okay, these are like the role-based use cases that we're going to kind of solve for. And then ultimately it moves up to there being like a real kind of step function from a human potential and like productivity kind of perspective, or I think that's currently the goal. And then ultimately getting to a place of like how we think about it is like true co-intelligence, right? Like there's AI systems and tooling in place that is like truly impacting like every person in the organization and even thought partners in like, strategic and creative exercises as well. I mean, that's much further down the line. I think right now we're in a place of like role-based use cases is what everybody is kind of thinking about. But to go back to the original question, like to me, AI fluency, it's about driving kind of real cultural shift in an organization and not just adoption for adoption's sake.
Yeah, yeah. Love that because I mean, when we think about fluency, it's more dynamic and it's more again in the hands of the learner so they can figure it out while they're using the tools versus teaching somebody how to use ChatGPT. How do you teach somebody how to use ChatGPT?
So they just need to go and use it, right? Well, it goes back to a good statement that I think I've mentioned in a few panels and such, and it's kind of indirectly how we got introduced from your one of your colleagues is like we often use the term, demo don't memo
Mhm.
in the construct of like AI fluency, AI upskilling, right? Like I just think that that is just such an appropriate way to kind of put it in terms of like this paradigm that we're kind of going through, right? Is like you need to be using the tools, showing them off, experimenting, celebrating failures. Leadership needs to be doing that too, right? It's like truly a top-down type of scenario, including the HR and L&D and people leaders like playing with these tools as well. But I think as I think about folks that are moving down that path of being truly AI fluent, like they're carving out the spaciousness for what I just kind of mentioned, and that's either company wide or within teams, depending on size of the organization.
That's right. That is so true. And it's a mindset. It's not like you teach me how to click a button like we used to in Salesforce.com implementation or ERP implementation or any previous technology implementation. So,
Well,
yes,
exactly.
she also speaks to the fact that here we have to learn how to use an intelligence in our flow of work, not a tool. Because the moment we think about it as a tool, it takes us back to our previous understanding of tools, which is a system, a software system, where you click a button and an outcome happens. Here, you're not clicking a button for an outcome. You're actually engaging in a back and forth conversation with an intelligence. I mean, it's not human intelligence. Maybe it's a collective human intelligence
Yeah.
that we're dealing with, but it's a different experience. So it has to be a different mindset with which we engage.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and it even makes me think about like we've been trying to catalog some of the organizations that we think have been doing a really good job in terms of whether or not they're like building in public and sharing the frameworks that they're using. And so tying this back to a degree like performance management or there's being like frameworks implemented that like people are being evaluated and becoming kind of AI fluent, which it could be without the right definition, could be a little bit nebulous. But what I'm trying to kind of say here is that like I think the most important part, and I think the Zapier folks have said this really well, like we don't expect you to be a master at every tool, but you need to be AI curious. It's like that is like the baseline is being AI curious, right? And being curious in the tooling and what the technology can do and what problems it can solve for well or not well is such a big part of it. And so, for them, they've been sharing some of the frameworks in public, and they have a framework where like basically by department there's examples of like as it pertains to being AI fluent. Here's what's kind of unacceptable, capable, adoptive, transformative. And if you think about it, it's like that's like, you know, going down the realm of like a classic kind of skills matrix type of like where you want people to get to. They've published a version one already around this, which I think is great.
That is totally great. So tell me more about Disco as a platform because we talk about AI first learning experiences, the mindset, AI fluency. We talk about maybe we can start with before we jump into Disco, help us understand one, what's the difference between a platform that bolts on AI versus a platform that's natively built with AI in mind?
Mhm.
And where does Disco fit into this equation and how does it transform the learning experience for a
Yeah.
learner?
No, love the question, right? And so, yeah, you mentioned it on the intro, but Disco is an AI first social learning platform. So it really is leaning into the social cohort kind of personal peer-to-peer learning that we think is important, but also is built with like AI kind of natively into the system to allow for both like AI generated learning, AI generated curriculum generation, program generation, that sort of thing. I think what we're seeing in the world across many tools, many sectors is like if you were fortunate enough to kind of launch a company right as this kind of AI and LLM boom happened, you're very fortunate to be able to like build build with AI at the center of the product from day one, right? So I think that can generally be felt from like a UI UX kind of perspective because you were thinking about AI as like a core aspect of the experience from like the early day designs, right? So I think that's what kind of sets across the two. But I mean, it's not too dissimilar to whatever it was 10 years ago when people would be like, we're a mobile first company, right? Like there's a marketing aspect that's happening to all of this too. But on that side, those companies were thinking about the mobile experience first, right? So now you're thinking about the AI agent or the agentic experience first in the product, right? Which I think is an important kind of call out. And so for us, we think of it basically like the AI experience or the agent experience in the platform, there's two ways to look at it. There's the operator agent, which is helping the L&D professional more rapidly kind of create relevant kind of content and personalized learning and really support with a lot of other operational processes, whether or not that's bringing people back into the system and automations and nudges and things like that. And then there's the learner facing agent, which is kind of what I mentioned earlier, right? It's going to give you personalized learning based on who you are, your role, and what it is you're looking to achieve in the system. So that's delivered through like an experience within your kind of, you think about Disco being like the really the end-to-end learning environment, right? It's like course authoring, course delivery, and continued kind of ongoing kind of engagement with your peers. The learner facing AI, it's taking inputs from all of your lesson content, your curriculum content, webinars, training oriented videos that are uploaded to the platform, ongoing channel discussions or social discussions that are happening in the system through channels, DMs, feeds, etc.
Mhm.
All of that building into like one centralized kind of experience for the learner, right? So it really becomes this like unified kind of brain around everything kind of L&D oriented for the.
That's fascinating. So, when you talk about unified experience from a learner's perspective, does Disco sit onto an existing L&D tech stack or does it displace the tech stack? How does it fit into the tech stack equation for it?
Yeah, generally the latter. I mean, we're exploring and thinking through kind of other models, but generally, it's kind of been displacing. I mean, we do coexist with other authoring tools that are exporting into formats like SCORM and such, and we of course integrate with SCORM. So that course authoring piece you can use or your our authoring, or you can use the existing kind of authoring tools in the market. But certainly, Disco is the like experience layer, right? Like it's very modern and intuitive UI UX. We took more cues from consumer apps in terms of how it looks and feels like than necessarily enterprise learning platforms. And so certainly for organizations that we're working with, I mean, the delivery of the curriculum and any of the live kind of components, like it all starts in Disco.
Fantastic. Would it be fair to assume I haven't played with the platform, so I'm really curious and I'm asking you all these questions from an L&D perspective, because if it is an experience layer, sits on top of a variety of systems behind the scenes that have either content or connections, will Disco be connected to, in addition to an LMS, let's say Slack or Teams? Like, how do we power the social aspect in Disco?
Yeah, really good question, right? So today we do have a Slack integration, right? So Slack oriented organizations can work with us and we integrate in there and there's certain obvious information that gets pushed into Slack and curriculum notifications and things like that kind of get pushed in. Of course, Slack channels you can reference to pull in to inform, the our Ask AI kind of functionality. So all of the contextual conversations that happen in Slack can drive the personalized learning that happens in the system, right? So that exists today. We're actively kind of exploring other similar integrations, as you can imagine, right? Because the ultimate question becomes like, how do we rapidly enable an organization to like add their organizational context into the system, right? And so I think that's a question that we're like actively kind of thinking about what is like the most efficient way to solve.
Absolutely. All right. So we unpacked and looked at the experience of L&D professionals. So Disco helps you use AI in content creation, curriculum generation. It connects to social platforms in an organization to fast track the connection, social based learning experience. Another thing that I'm really curious to learn more about the platform is the analytics side of things, because typical traditional LMS SCORM gives you only completions. It tells you nothing from a strategic planning perspective. Like just like every team, even L&D team needs to understand where is the content demand, where is the demand phasing out, where should we focus our time and energy, what kind of content should we create, curate, how do we enhance that learning experience for the learner. And then before AI, XAPI was a big thing, which was promising that now we can collect micro data around user behavior and analyze it, mine it. LXPs became a big thing. With AI in the mix now, especially systems like Disco that sit on top of variety of systems, how will an L&D team, we don't have to get into nuts and bolts, but basically I'm trying to get into what kind of analytics will L&D team get through a platform like Disco that helps power their choices and decisions that they have to make.
Yeah, really good question. And so the platform is rich in analytics. The way we're kind of thinking about it is the engagement analytics is super important for L&D kind of leaders to know about because of a lot of what I mentioned on the early part of the call, right? Like if now we're going to be kind of evaluating the performance of the L&D programs around like, persistence and kind of ongoing kind of peer-to-peer kind of learning, and then some of that happening in the Disco system, continued kind of logging in and ongoing engagement in the system through a variety of different things, whether or not that's messages or content completions or reactions or channel messages or whatever it may be. That is something like we didn't necessarily see in a lot of like other platforms, and we give you a lot of flexibility to define that the way you want it, the way you want to. Because I think what we've seen is like the definition of engagement, it differs organization to organization. So I would say the team was very thoughtful in making that a very flexible tool. But then on the other side are like more traditional learning progress analytics. Like those are more, they're defined in the system, right? Like the way someone completes a module or a course or an assignment or a quiz and completing certain thresholds for a quiz to move to the next module, like those are more defined in the system, but all of that exists.
Yeah.
And then I think sometimes the like, the critical piece for the manager, right? More of like the line manager, the L&D line manager, like being able to get a holistic view of the employee, right? Of like, here's everything that they've done in the system. Here's all of the courses they've enrolled in or how active they've been in terms of engaging in maybe more of like the social learning elements of the system. And so those are just a few of the things that we've kind of done and thought through, which I think are like a little bit different than maybe other kind of players in the marketplace.
Yeah. Oh, fascinating. So, can you help me with a lived experience or a story from your client side where they've totally, changed the traditional L&D game, or how did Disco help them transform the learning environment in their organization?
Yeah, so one that comes to mind is a client in the like the broader commercial real estate financial modeling kind of space, and they're actually a large like training company, so they do a lot of work with big banks and other players in their market, and they migrated everything to Disco from, I believe it was more of like a bespoke kind of platform that they had done. So that's just a good example of like some scenarios that are out there that people tried to build something themselves and now have moved to a kind of larger and like very flexible platform like a Disco. But what's been amazing is like they really pushed the platform to its limits in a sense of like really leveraging like all of the like learning functionality, delivering a variety of kind of different cohorts that have curriculum, live events, collections of resources that sit outside the curriculum, and really making this like a fulsome like learning environment. Like we often use the word academy, right? Like these are full digital academies, not too dissimilar to like a physical one that you would go to, right? There's people, there's resources, there's actual classes, but that's just one aspect of everything that's kind of in the system. This organization had an abundance of like really rich, very tailored, specific content around the topic area that they serve. And so they basically, uploaded all that information to the system, already also referenced just a few like of their own URLs and information that's like publicly available to like really build out that initial version of like a bespoke kind of like learner facing AI that's like just been trained up on just their kind of learning IP, their content, and now also like the ongoing social conversations in the system. And at last guess, they were, or like last look, sorry. I mean, one of the users in the platform that has like just the highest usage of our like learner facing AI, because they've done two things, right? They had an abundance of really rich content that they could quickly pull into the system, and then two, they've really created this kind of behavior in the tool where this is where like you come to Disco not just to go through the curriculum, but you come here to learn from others and pose questions and ask things to AI and to your peers.
Yeah.
And so they've really learned into like the two pieces that we're often kind of singing in the market, which is like the social element and the AI element, and they're doing both on in the system like really really well. And so that's kind of the yeah.
That's beautiful. Another curiosity question. What was the migration and implementation like? Did the client do the heavy lifting on their side, or do the clients have to work through a third party to implement a platform like Disco?
Yeah, so the answer is it depends. But in that scenario, there was no third party, so it was a very very hands-on relationship with this client and then Disco, right? So definitely a big shout out to our customer success team. They're amazing for enterprise size clients. Like we will develop like a very kind of bespoke one-to-one kind of migration path with configuration workshops and training and a variety of other things to kind of get folks to launch, right? This has been, ongoing transformation for them, right? They got all of their existing content onto Disco in the early days, and now they, we're one of the earlier organizations that were one of the early customers that was like testing our Ask AI product. And so that like resulted in even like a closer relationship. So this is like as much of like a strategic partnership between the two companies than just like a regular kind of vendor client type of scenario. So it's been super collaborative, really amazing feedback kind of on both sides. But to the original question, it's always tough to put a date on it, right? But there was a really defined, I forget what it was in this scenario, but let's just say it was, maybe 8 weeks or so of a defined, like, this is what it's going to take to go from like, the initial migration of like the content from your previous platform to Disco. And so we mapped that out with the client.
That's fantastic. And the reason why I asked this question, Chris, is because I've had lived experiences with platforms in the past. And sometimes it is really hard for organizations to let go of what they've already implemented because there's so much time, energy, and resources that have gone into implementing a traditional learning management system. And sometimes that is not even done by the company selling the platform. You have to engage with a third party, and it's not a very pleasant experience. So some L&D teams might have that past life trauma before they even think about, should I let
Totally.
go of this and engage with a new platform? That's where I wanted to learn from you around how hard or easy is it to implement an AI first platform like Disco?
Right. Yeah. Well, and it's interesting side comment, like as I was preparing for this, like I wrote down a quick note as I was thinking about a few things, is like the transition to maybe using an AI native system and such. The reality of like L&D debt is like it's a very real thing, right? Like those of us that work for technology companies, it's a very common term, tech debt, right? Which is, you have to, manage around if you have like a, an older platform or whatever it may be, right? That same kind of concept I think exists in the L&D world, where you have to be okay to like let some of it go, right? If it isn't relevant anymore, I mean, yes, you probably invested kind of time and money into certain things, but I think there's an element of like recognizing like L&D debt and what, you want to bring to a new environment or a new strategy, and what maybe needs to get left behind. Yeah, just a concept that I kind of was like noodling as we prepared for this that I think was like hitting home. So I
Yeah.
gotta finesse the thought there a little bit more, but I think that's a real thing with L&D and people ops kind of
Yeah.
teams.
Absolutely. And which teams do you think where it's easier for people to think about the L&D debt or tech debt? Companies where L&D teams have the technical know-how internally? Like, are you seeing teams at different maturity levels? What's the readiness in the market right now for people
Yeah.
to think about AI technology for learning and development?
Yeah, I think a lot of the L&D debt, kind of comes from maybe like historical content that's been created, the desire to like continue to have that content readily available, even if it may be partially, outdated or maybe doesn't have all the existing kind of organizational context. So the good thing about Disco is that we can help with that, right? We can help you remix or update your content by porting it over and and using AI to like update it. So we're super excited to like solve that problem as well. And I'd say, yeah, it's a bit of a mixed bag in terms of like the technical kind of know-how or proficiency. I think like, you know, the larger the organization you get, generally have like there being someone that like, this might not be their formal title, but there certainly is like the LMS LXP or learning suite kind of admin or operator that is clearly the like central, like the power user in the org. And that person is so important, right? You know, because that person is kind of holding the keys to how the tooling works, and that person needs to be on board to like be willing to shift or evolve into something that maybe is AI native or more modern or whatever it may be, or at least be open to a proof of concept with something that is like a bit different, right? So I think we spend a lot of time like with that person in a partnership process, because that person ends up being, you know, our best friend. So once we get into like a commercial arrangement, right? It's like they're the person in the depths of the tool, right? So
Uh,
uh
They can act like translators as well, like
exactly.
change, like interpreting the technical language into business speak so that the decision makers can make the right choices and decisions.
Spoken like a true practitioner over there.
All right, as we wrap up our conversation today, Chris, my last question for you is around the L&D leadership and what should they be thinking about or watching out for as they think about, creating a new value for L&D departments, which means looking at people process technology for their teams differently.
Yeah, I mean, I think right now, like being really open to experimentation, I think is super important, right? Like even I was reminded of this in a different context the other day from my CTO about something around an internal tool that we're using, and it's just like the technology landscape across many sectors is changing so fast because the cost to, you know, create technology is decreasing at a rapid rate, right? And so just being really open to like broadly experimenting with technology and new tools out there, I think it is like the first thing that kind of comes to mind from a leadership perspective, and that being like a culture that you're kind of like enabling, right? So I think that that's an important thing to kind of highlight. And then two, like if you haven't already formally kickstarted an AI fluency program, that should be on the Q4, OKRs or goals or whatever system you use, right? Like truly that being, I think, highlighted or indicated as like a top C-suite like strategic objective for any organization, that, you know, ideally you're already starting that journey in some way, and we talked about that a lot already. I think the one thing I didn't mention, but the important thing for leadership to know is like they're going to be at one place on their journey, and it might be they don't feel like they're as knowledgeable as they need to be. They might be testing tools. Everybody is starting their AI fluency journey from a different place, and the organization needs to be kind of comfortable with that and acknowledge that, and that creates more of a safe space for everybody to learn from each other and to experiment and even fail, like, you know, and share those failures and such is kind of important. So yeah, I mean, experimentation on the technology side, being open to experimentation, and then frankly, kickstarting your AI fluency, AI upskilling, kind of larger strategic priority, I would say would be the two things that I would come to mind.
Wow. That's a great point to end our conversation on. And I love the fact that you're highlighting and underscoring the fact that readiness isn't about buying the latest tools all the time. It's about cultivating that learning agility and AI fluency as a strategic capability across all levels of the organization. So, Chris, thank you so much for such a rich conversation today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks, Shweta. It was really fun.
And to our audience, if you loved this episode, be sure to check the description for LinkedIn connection link for Chris. Please do connect with him. He has so much wisdom to share with us all. And until next time, stay curious, stay courageous, and keep riding the tide.